I just want to cue Caesar Flickerman's theme all the time, all day long. You guys, this miracle has come to pass because of a fanfic. Welcome to the Hunger Games Renaissance that we're all a part of, and we're all rereading the Hunger Games, and I'm obsessed. First and foremost, thank you for visiting this video, just meaning that I'm not alone in this Hunger Games Renaissance, and it's actually happening, and I'm excited, and I'm so glad to be discussing something I never thought, which is Hunger Games in Peeta's point of view. For those of you who do know, you're probably here because you know, because there's an amazing writer out there. She's on Archive of Our Own. It's kind of like Wattpad. Her name is Igsygrace. She's incredible. I wish I could talk to her and just get on my knees and thank her for what she's done. She has rewritten the entire series in Peeta's point of view, keeping all the same dialogue, everything true, and canon. It literally feels canon. It's like Suzanne Collins wrote it herself. It's not even that Suzanne Collins needs to release it herself, because it's already been done by this wonderful author. She actually wrote 4. They're on Goodreads. It's incredible. All the reviews are saying this is canon. The first one is Peeta's Games. The second one is Throwing Sparks. The third one is The Mutt. And then there's a fourth one, Back to 12. I don't know what the fourth one is about. I've just read the first one. So I read Peeta's Games and The Hunger Games side by side, going back and forth, comparing, just taking it all in, that we get both perspectives. Like when I was reading Peeta's Games, I felt like I was reading The Hunger Games. It wasn't a fanfic. It was literally Peeta's point of view through the entirety of the book. I was in District 12, I was in the games with Peeta. It didn't miss a beat. I didn't feel like it was missing anything. I felt like this was incredible work, and I can't believe that someone heavily has studied the series, this specific book, and written in Peeta's point of view. Also knowing Peeta and his character so well and portraying his inner thoughts. It's written in first person, which I love, just how Hunger Games is written in first person in Katniss's point of view. I'll just be talking about everything. I took very much a lot of notes with pictures and screenshots included. So first of all, we start off with Peeta in a wrestling match. It fills in a lot of gaps, and that's what I love about Peeta's point of view, is that it fills in all the gaps, all of Katniss's thoughts, all of her memories of him. Confirmed by Peeta, I think he's at the championship. The whole time he was trying to impress this girl, which remains nameless, but we assume and we know that it's Katniss, because he does not talk about any other girl, is infatuated, he loves Katniss. He also knows that he doesn't talk to Katniss, and he also describes her as someone who is not the center of attention, more reserved and mysterious. I absolutely adored and loved getting to know Peeta's background, siblings, family, because we really don't get to see that in Hunger Games at all. Mockingjay, when it's confirmed that his family is dead, literally no time to really mourn. It's like, oh, we didn't know them, and minimal knowledge on his family. So it was nice to have that background, know that he had brothers, no sisters, an abusive mom, a pretty emotionally desensitized father. Kind of sounds like Peeta's background to me. Peeta lives a pretty normal life. He makes bread, he has friends at school, he has girls who are obviously in love with him, who wouldn't be. So we go into the reaping. Peeta's pretty much on edge, but strangely calm. I mean, it's how the world is. I kind of loved getting to know also Peeta's location in District 12, that he was not the higher, but the businessy part of District 12. There's like the seam, which is where Katniss is from, like the miners, really low income, people who starve, which was hard for me to wrap my head around. Was people would go to school and you could tell that they're hungry. Like Peeta talks about how people go to school and you could just see them get thinner and thinner and eventually just not show up because people were dying of starvation. And it's just crazy to me that they had people die of starvation or living in like this very old-fashioned place, but also had a running school. I don't quite understand it, but maybe they were just makeshifting of the best they could. Just, it's so screwed up. This whole system. He knew that people from the seam, and he specifically mentions Katniss had her name put in several times and several times more, so that Prim didn't have her name put in more than once. So Peeta is shocked. I loved knowing Peeta's inner thoughts when he was called from the reaping, because we really don't get to see very much other than that he's very, very withdrawn. I mean, Katniss isn't even that enthralled. She's like, Peeta Mellark, we've hardly ever talked and you got called? Oh my gosh, what are we? This is crazy. What? And then she immediately thinks about the story with them where he gave her bread. when she was starving when she was 10, 12. Peeta doesn't even notice that his name is called at first because he's thinking about Katniss and he's like, wow, this is so sad and heartbreaking. The girl I love. Also, this is super interesting. He has school friends. One of them is named Aster. She's in love with Peeta. Peeta is under the impression that Gale is Katniss's cousin because someone talked about how Gale is super attractive. Like one of the girlfriends, Aster and her friend were like, Gale is so cute. And Peeta's like, what? And they were like, Katniss is so lucky. And Peeta was like, what? They're cousins. And they're like, I'm pretty sure they're not. The whole backstory with the Capitol later and also Peeta's whole misunderstanding. This is super interesting and it's literally like Peeta never really thinks about it again. Is that Aster comes up to him after he's called at the reaping and she says basically her farewell and kisses him. He thinks about it because he's never been kissed before and he's like, oh wow. His brother doesn't volunteer for him, which is really sad because Effie's like, any volunteers for Peeta? Nothing. Really sad. And that was one of the things I noticed throughout this whole book is that Peeta is very calm and he doesn't really freak out, not high anxiety, not emotionally withdrawn though. As I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, this is weird. I thought that he's very emotionally intelligent and showy, so I thought he would take the reaping and everything very deeply and sad and just depression, but he was kind of just floating, and I think it's because imagine just Peeta's whole life living this screwed up situation, just how unfortunate the reaping was every year, knowing that your name could be called. They were almost prepared in a sense that they would be reaped in the reaping. And I thought that was really kind of a sad take. It didn't really even hit Peeta. He pretty much accepted death right off. We see right after the reaping, his family says goodbye to him. His dad gives him sugar cookies, which is super sweet. His dad's really tender, and then his mom is like, maybe we'll have a victor this year. She's a fighter, that one. So Peeta's kind of like hurt because his mom really sucks. But we also see like Peeta's character throughout this book. Peeta, from the time of his reaping, is completely selfless. Like even when his brother didn't volunteer, he was like, oh, now he's safe out of the reaping. Like that's his first thought. Now my brother won't be reaped ever because he turns 18. So we meet Haymitch, Effie, everyone from the Capitol were on the train. This is when you really see it cross over the dialogue because it's exactly like Hunger Games, but in Peeta's point of view, like everything that Haymitch says, everything that Effie says is word for word, punctuation, everything. And we just get little tidbits of Peeta's reactions, inner thoughts. Like we see from the beginning that he is, like when he sees Katniss, he gets kind of a jolt. But overall, we just see that Peeta's like inner thoughts, he's just a good person. As he's showering Haymitch after Haymitch became really drunk and sick and he put him in the shower, and overall like Peeta is very thinking outward all the time. Even when it comes down to the Hunger Games, which is just like confirming the golden retriever vibe that we all get from Peeta Mellark. But he sees the way Katniss's attitude is towards the game and he like wants her to win. He's not exactly sure how he's gonna make this happen, but he pretty much vows to himself that he's gonna take this upon himself to make sure she wins. Kind of crazy, and I love seeing that unfold. Also, some interesting parts are just like after the chariot ride, Katniss kisses his cheek and Peeta's like, oh my gosh, yes. And then of course Katniss thinks that he's playing this huge game because he is like, wow, fire looks really good on you. And she's like, oh, two can play this game, I'll kiss him on the cheek. She sees him as like a career almost, which comes true later. Peeta kind of knows this from the beginning. He kind of sees how Katniss could be playing into it, and he honestly doesn't care because he really likes her. Well, one of the most interesting parts to me was when Peeta had that conversation with Haymitch. I want to be in with the careers so I can help out Katniss. Haymitch makes this whole game plan like, I'm gonna get you in with the careers, you're gonna convince them that you're with them, lead them to Katniss, basically bail, give Katniss the bow that you're gonna retrieve as she hopefully runs in the woods after the countdown. I want you also to whisper away from the camera, Katniss, Katniss, play on this whole romance. And also at the interviews, make sure to share some personal background. The Capitol is now all in your personal business and they want to know. If you want sponsors, get personal. And so Peeta's like, okay. When he confesses his feelings for Katniss in the interview to Caesar Flickerman, Peeta's like, I feel strangely like I'm lying, although I'm not, because he knew that he was doing this for the benefit of her and him to kind of play off this romance to get sponsors. Of course, Katniss is really mad. And a lot of things I was just reminded about was when Katniss pushes him after the interviews and he like gets his hands cut up by the flower pot. You just see how calloused Katniss is. Like, they're so different from each other. Haymitch is just reminding her, like, he made you look desirable. Then he mentions something about Gale, and you realize, like, Peeta is painfully at this point aware that Gale is part of the picture, especially how Katniss reacts to Gale when his name is mentioned. But never once does Peeta compare himself to Gale, which I think is so prominent because we see that he never saw it as competition. And that's what I saw someone relate the whole series. Peeta never saw this love triangle as a competition. And someone even said in the last movie when Gale and Peeta have this conversation, like, I guess it's whoever she picks. And Peeta says, yeah. Peeta honestly never saw it as a competition. He just saw it as he loved Katniss and wanted her to survive. He wanted to help her, and he honestly loved her and just wanted to show her that. Which I think was proven in this is, like, he never actually thinks about Gale that often unless he's being selfless about it. And that is something he says later when they're in the cave, when they're, you know, playing it up for the crowd. Peeta literally thinks to himself, I hope that Gale forgives her for whatever happened in this cave when I die. Like, I really hope that he can overlook that. And I was like, oh my gosh, Peeta. And I just love that this author just got every single selfless part, every characteristic of Peeta. It's also really interesting to see Peeta's emotions. Another thing that I loved, similar to how Katniss is really close to her stylist, Cinna, Peeta is really close to his stylist, Portia. And their relationship is really cute. After this whole thing with Katniss and he feels bad that she reacted poorly to the whole thing he said when he was trying to do it for the benefit of both of them, Portia was like, you did a good thing tonight. And that's kind of the first time we see Peeta's emotion is when he's like, I know, but I just don't want to die. And that's the first time he cries. And I think he only cries twice in this entire book, you guys. And like, it's just so emotional and good. Peeta's kind of strangely more calm going into the games, although he feels a ton of anxiety. He also kind of goes in emotionally detached, just being like, okay, I'm gonna go with the careers. He has a plan and he's like, if I die trying, then I die. He's literally accepted his fate. We get to know different tributes. Like with Katniss, we get to know Rue. With Peeta's point of view, we really get to know Cato and Marvel. And we also see, like, Cato is really dumb. He's very strong and leadership oriented, but he's not the brightest in the bunch, and we get to see that piles all the food together. Peeta's like, that's the dumbest thing ever, but everyone does it because it's Cato. He looks at Katniss, he nods at her when she eyes the bow in the cornucopia, goes in the forest, and he feels a huge relief. He'll look into the forest and just whisper her name for the cameras, and he feels super awkward, but he also feels comfort when doing it because he honestly loves this girl. Peeta's been stung by the tracker jacker. He's hallucinating. One of my favorite kind of parallels is that when he is hallucinating, he says, I see things, I hear things, real or not real. I love it. Peeta literally like sleeps the next 3-4 days. He's just sleeping in the mud, camouflaging himself. He sleeps all day. He's starving. He's so weak. His leg, he can't look at it. He's just like, okay, I'm gonna die, but I'd rather die like this than die by somebody's knife or sword. Katniss finds him, cleans him up, and helps him. And this is the really sweet part. And this is where I heavily like cross-read because I loved it so much. I just loved cross-reading certain parts. Like when she finds out that he has blood poisoning, she's thinking to herself, suddenly I'm worried he's gonna die. In the exact sentence, in Peeta's point of view, he says, the frustration in her eyes widened to alarm. Just seeing how they each view each other and view these conversations. I also loved seeing added lines. Now you guys, like the lines were pretty much identical, everything was true to the book, but there are certain added lines, like Katniss is like, I'm brush his hair aside, and then their conversation goes on. But in Peeta's point of view, it says that she says, you need a haircut. And I just love that we get to see more of Katniss's personality and just their conversations and things like that. You know, Katniss has been helping him, feeding him, doing all these things, going out and hunting for him. There's one part when he just looks at her and he fully is aware and knows, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this girl. He says, I think back to how she ensnared me all those years ago, and it wasn't anything she did on purpose. It was my oversensitive heart, really. But ever since then, though I lived and breathed and looked like the normal boy, I was bound to her in this strange and immovable way that made me something like this insane situation that I'm in now almost inevitable. It might have ended less dramatically with just burnt fingers, a broken heart, but it was always there, dormant, waiting for me to eventually pick it up and figure out what it was. Until I went out on stage to declare it, I never really put a name on it. I never called it a crush or infatuation or anything like that. She fascinated me, but she's a fascinating person. She was just Katniss. There were girls and there was Katniss, all in the category by herself. Always in the corner of my eye, always my first association, the first notes of a song, the first aroma of bread when it was almost done, the first drops of rain, the first spot of color in the spring. She was in all these things. So it was just a matter of time. I had this vague idea that school would end and it would all fall into place. Then she volunteered and my name was called, as if I shake off the melodramatic thoughts. And I'm like, Peeta! But basically he goes on to say how much he loves her and how he truly knew in that moment that he loved her. I loved seeing that. It's so strange to see how literally legit Peeta's feelings are and how Katniss, in her point of view, she's like, wow, he's so charismatic, such a good actor, he really knows what he's doing. But then there's some parts, like when Peeta talks about her dad and his singing voice and just Katniss volunteering to sing the school song, he was ensnared by day one and he just knew that he was done for. I think that was a really cute part. When Katniss and Peeta started talking about how they helped each other with the bread and how when they were 5 years old he noticed her and really was intrigued by her. Well, Katniss specifically was like, huh, it's crazy that we're pretending, but he's pulling stories from the past as if they're real. And that's when she kind of notices maybe Peeta's not pretending. Peeta's pretty much accepted death and he starts just talking freely, and there's a part where Katniss, in her point of view, she's like, he must be sick, he's not making any sense. But Peeta's perfectly coherent, you see on his end, is not sharing with Katniss, oh, I'm gonna die and you're gonna live and you're gonna win and you're gonna live a happy life. Also, in Peeta's point of view, they add like a little bit more forehead kisses and it's really cute. We also see that Katniss is driven by sponsors, but also that she doesn't want to lose the boy with the bread. Peeta's really holding on to that he really sees like some of her motives. He sees the fear in her eyes that she doesn't want to lose him. They've both been so lonely in the games and you both see them explain that and how grateful they are for each other. Also, their first kiss was so cute. She was like, oh, the cameras. Okay, if I want this, Haymitch said he needs something more. So she kisses him and Peeta's like, I'm melting. I'm crazy for her. Katniss says, oh, I lean in and kiss him. Okay, moving on. But we see also that later, like when Peeta is healed back to health after she goes to the feast, he's kind of helping her. He kisses her and Katniss talks about how it's stirring inside her and she goes in for another kiss, but he just kisses her nose. And Peeta is just explaining that he feels very vulnerable and very scared because he sees that he has real feelings and he's not sure what to do in such a weird, strange situation called the Hunger Games, what to do with his own heart. And that was really cute. Katniss has always felt like she wasn't a good actor, so she didn't really want to talk, so she'd ask more questions. But Peeta is more hesitant just because he is literally sharing his honest to goodness heart, his feelings ever. He knew that that meant something. I also learned so much about Katniss in Peeta's point of view. Katniss is less emotional and less open book, but Peeta is able to read her, so he does make assumptions about her, like seeing that she loved Rue when she talks about Rue. Peeta makes that connection, like she said she isn't good at making friends, but look, she has this connection. She's connected the districts in a way that nobody else did. This girl is different. Peeta changes because instead of just accepting death, he wants to fight along with Katniss. He sees her fired and towards the Capitol and her resentment, and he wants to join in on that, and he sees it all differently. Instead of just something that is inevitable, he sees something that can be changed. Also, Peeta, this whole thing, he knows that they're kind of working up a romance for the sponsors, but he sees that certain things he says, she's wondered and intrigued instead of just strategizing, which he was like, whoa, is something mutual here? But yeah, we see that Katniss overall thinks, oh, we'll be friends after the games. And then we see Peeta, he's really wanting to see what's gonna happen between them after the games, and that's really sweet to see. I also love I just love Peeta and I think he's so funny, and that's something I wish they showed more in the movies, is that they made him look helpless and weak. And I feel so bad because that is not who Peeta Mellark is at all. And we see that in this book. Although he's injured, he's a fighter, he's strong, he's smart. Oftentimes smarter than Katniss, which we think is the intelligent one. Love Josh Hutcherson. I think he did incredible, and I think the movies are pretty much perfect, but that's the one thing I would have changed, is that they made him look weak. He's not weak. I wish they left more of the cave, because the cave I feel like is a big chunk of the book. He's just so funny. Also, something I love in Peeta's point of view is that he draws in the cave. And we see that he finds, like, I think a white rock of some kind, and he draws under the tarp that they've been lying on, a dry spot in the cave. And he's drawing, and he draws a couple times throughout the book. And at the end, Portia even says to him, like, I love that you drew. I love that you found a way to draw. I love seeing, like, more of the artist side of him, not only the camouflage that he did. I also loved seeing how it flip-flopped after the feast. Peeta's taking care of Katniss. Then, of course, everything goes down, and they just have Cato and them. Peeta's finally feeling like, oh my gosh, we can do this. I can get healed. Hopefully the mutts come out. This scene, it just flies by. Of course, the ending flies by. Peeta's incredibly hurt, and it's crazy to see his description of pain and everything. Like, I love seeing his point of view of all the injuries and just how hard it is. And at the end, when they're on the cornucopia, Cato and everything, and Cato's of course being sadly eaten alive, Peeta is literally dying. He's bleeding out, he's dying. You just see his thoughts. He's just like, oh, Katniss, oh, she smells so nice, dandelions, flowers. And then he goes into like tangents, and the author was so good at explaining him like slowly going out of it. Like, he was literally dying, and then Katniss just being like, Peeta, Peeta, and him just being like, what? He felt fulfilled. Like, he felt and he knew that Katniss was gonna win whether he was alive or not, and he felt comfortable dying in her arms. And we just see how sweet of a heart Peeta has. But we also see that Katniss is keeping him alive for her sanity. And we see in Mockingjay, literally losing Peeta does not keep you sane. So this is my favorite comparison. Just because I'm a romantic and I love Peeta and Katniss, this is a part where Cato has died, but now they've announced blah blah blah, there's only one victor, and Peeta's like, please let me die, you need to live. She's like, heck no. She's making a plan. He said, listen, he says, pulling me to his feet, we both know they have to have a victor, it can only be one of us, please take it for me. And he goes on about how he loves me, what life would be without me, and I've stopped listening because his previous words are trapped in my head, thrashing desperately around. So we see that she's like, and he goes on about how he loves me and how he can't live without me. I love that in Peeta's point of view, we get to see what he says, and it's adorable. He basically is just saying, listen to me, we both know that we have to have a victor. It can only be one of us. Please take it from me. I need you to know I'm not sorry. I've liked you for such a long time, and I've fallen in love with you, Katniss. What would be the point of me going home without you? And you think I could kill you? Let me bleed out, and it will be the game maker's hand, not yours. If that's what you want, stay with me while I go, and then you can go home. Please, Katniss. Also parallel to when she says, stay with me. Amazing. Just love this book so much. Basically, we see, like, he thinks of her. He kisses her one last time before he dies. He literally says, I give her one last kiss, and then he thinks of her before he takes the berries, and then of course they go home. He passes out. I love seeing that point of view, and also him getting the news by the Capitol that his leg did not survive. Heartbreaking because of everything that Peeta's gone through. That was such hard news for him, and seeing his emotions go through that, because we never really got to see his reaction. Basically after the victory and everything, like, Peeta's super comfortable kissing her now, and he kisses her for so long in the victory interview, and it's really cute, and Katniss is like, we kiss for 10 minutes, and Peeta's like, I just love her so much and can't get enough. And now Peeta's like, I desperately want alone time without the cameras, just to know what's in the cards for us. They walk on the train track, and he picks up flowers, and Katniss thinks of Gale, because those flowers are affiliated with Gale when they hunt in the woods or something like that. Stupid. And then of course Katniss basically confesses, I was faking, I had a plan with Haymitch, and he's like, in his mind he's thinking, wow, that hurts that you made a plan. Almost worse than if you would have just independently made that plan yourself. But he's super hurt, and he's like, well, was any of it real? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, let me know when you figure it out. Peeta's so hurt, and also very mature, and I love him. basically at the very end, you know, they take each other's hands, and this is where Katniss says, "I dread for when he lets go," and he's thinking, now we're strangers again. None of it was real. Nothing about it was real. And that's how it ends, and it's brutal and terrible and amazing, and I loved every second of it. Katniss and Peeta are completely different people, so I loved seeing them react, and specifically with their brewing romance that was for sponsors and everything, and how their emotions collided. But Peeta also explains how he feels like they missed a step, but he really wants to make, like, he feels like he has to convince her when they get home that it was real, and he has to convince her to love him. It's just so sad. Everything about it, like getting different details, even when Katniss and Peeta were having the same experience, just the little details, everything was just amazing. And like I said, you could tell this person knew Hunger Games so freaking well, and I loved seeing that. And I'm definitely so excited for Catching Fire, because this is where the romance brews even more. I am excited to read Catching Fire, but also Katniss is so frustrating with Gale, and I dread that. It will be fun to see like Peeta's point of view when he volunteers, and just so excited. I admire Peeta even more after these books, and I think I understand him even more, which is so fun and strange, and just she portrayed him so perfectly. And I just want to give a round of applause for this author. Anyways, let me know if I should do a review on the second book, and have a good one. May the odds be ever in your favor. I hate that I said that.